Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of 50 Shades of Lightworkers. Today, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm actually going to be interviewing someone very special that I met a couple days ago. So, for those of you that haven't been following my socials, I'm currently in the middle of nowhere in New South Wales in an eco village that also has a yoga center. And a few days ago, I was in this guitar class I just by chance wandered into, and there we had Matt, who is a former monk and runs a CBD oil business and teaches yoga philosophy. And I was sold an hour into the class because I'm like, wow, the way he explains things simplifies so many spiritual philosophies or yogic philosophies that helped me to understand my life in the past few years, but also gave me a better understanding as to how I can incorporate that into my business. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce you to the man of the hour, Matt. Would you like to tell us a bit more about who you are?
Sure. My name is Matt, and I work here at the Krishna Village, which is a yoga retreat center, and a 1,000 acre organic eco village. And yeah, I'm one of the philosophy teachers on the yoga teacher training, and I also teach philosophy classes to our retreat guests. And outside of my role here, living at the Krishna Village, I'm the managing director of a natural health supplement company called Papilio, and we provide natural alternatives to pharmaceutical medicines. And I just wanted to clarify something you mentioned before about my time as a monk. In different traditions and different spiritual traditions, being a monk can mean different things. In some
Mm.
traditions, it means that you've taken an oath or vows to live by a certain set of principles, such as a vow of poverty for the remainder of your life. But actually, in the authentic yoga traditions, the stage of brahmacharya was a stage that everybody went through, and it actually means student period. So when you are a student, it means that you are a student of the ancient yogic literature. So for a few years in my journey into the deeper aspects of yoga, I was practicing what is called brahmacharya, which is a stage where you essentially focus your learning and focus your energy on the ancient yogic tradition as opposed to having your focus in the material world. And it is something that, for the majority of people, actually, it's a stage that they pass through and then re-enter the world once they have received what they needed to receive from the tradition. Only a few people are actually called to authentically spend a life in renunciation from the material world. And if you're one of those people, then you know quite early that that's your calling. But for the majority of us, the rules and the regulations that are put in place can be very strict, and that's totally necessary in order to help um, fertilize and speed up someone's spiritual development. But it can be very, very difficult to function as a business person, for example, if your the requirements that are put on you as a monk are still being asked to be met, such as the time that you spend meditating each day, for example. If you're meditating for 6+ hours a day and engaged in devotional service for similar, then you don't really have much left over time for anything else. So I just wanted to draw that distinction.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've got a million questions, but do you guys see why I found this person to be so cool? Imagine like the image we have about a monk is somebody that's, like shaved heads, sitting in, monkey clothes that does nothing. And the moment you told me he has a CBD oil business, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, because CBD is from marijuana, right? And in the world of spirituality, when people want to be holier than thou, they almost look at all substance as if it's something that's going to kill us tomorrow. So that was another reason why I was so interested in getting to know you more and getting to, have you on this episode, I guess. And one thing you mentioned really leads to my next question: spirituality and material world, right? I believe there is a huge misconception in the various spiritual communities that in order to be spiritual, you need to give up your earthly desires, including possessions, money, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on it, and what is the actual truth based on the traditions that you have studied, I guess?
Sure. Well, if you have desires according to the yogic literature, they have to manifest at some point. Um, so one of the forms of yoga, karma yoga, is a form of yoga that's designed to essentially stop the accruement of karma and therefore stop the occurrence of these material desires. So they're not actually looked at as a bad thing, but more something that is worked through in a natural process. So you can cultivate a higher taste. For example, if you are someone that's constantly um, lusting after material objects, well, that process will only ever stop once you cultivate an awareness and a taste for something that is higher than that experience. So yeah, a desire. There's nothing inherently wrong with desires, but according to the yogic text, you have to know that it's desires that are essentially keeping you bound to the lower forms of material nature.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think um, we actually had a very similar conversation during your class the other day, right? And in a lot of times, the desires we have is never about the possession itself, right? Why do you want $1 million? How does having $1 million make you feel, right? We're always chasing this emotion. Maybe it's about feeling good enough, feeling like you're worthy. Why do you want to travel? Maybe it gives you a sense of adventure or challenge, you know? Why do you want to be in a relationship? Maybe it's love, maybe it's connection. And I believe going on the spiritual path or the healing path helps you get a better understanding of these unmet needs or your natural desires for certain emotions or states.
Sure.
So even when you do have desires, you have a better awareness as to like, why do I want what I want?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. But one thing that's important to at least establish early on in your spiritual journey is that if your state of, in Sanskrit, the word santosha means contentment. If your contentment is based on whether or not you have fulfilled your material desire, then that's not actually a very strong foundation to spring forth
Mm.
from. So the idea, ideally, would be to establish a level of contentment within yourself that isn't actually dependent on the achieving of certain desires. Because if you're already content,
Mm.
then you actually learn to enjoy the process rather than having your happiness based or dictated on the result of a particular endeavor.
I love that. And that leads to my next topic of conversation because all of you know manifestation is something that I was obsessed with for years, right? And for me, my quickest, easiest manifestations have always come from a place of detachment. And I only mastered, if I may say, detachment when I found wholeness within myself, when I realized, all of those things that I was desiring. It didn't come from a place of, oh, if I felt whole, they will manifest faster. But it came from a place of, well, actually, I feel great without them as well. Apparently, I just had to prove something to myself. Now that I've proven it, I feel like I am good enough. I am whole. I don't need these things. And the moment I started saying, I don't need it, oh, it would be lovely, just a thought, and things will just start happening, right? And this is when somebody taught me about the concept of manifestation versus prayer. So I would love to know your thoughts on it too. Like, how do you define manifestation? How do you define prayer? And we can go down the rabbit hole a little bit there, but I want to leave the floor open to you.
Sure, sure. Well, the ancient yogic texts say that we are the same in quality as the divine,
Mm.
but we differ in quantity. So that means that we actually have within us the quality or the capacity to create, just the same as the divine has the capacity to create. Although our quantity of creative capacity is much smaller, we
Mm.
still do have the capacity to influence and impact our reality. We are unable to completely control everything that happens to us because you've got a whole bunch of other things you need to consider, like the circumstance, the time, the other people that are involved, the conditions of the environment. But there is a capacity there that we have to actually draw something into material creation for our our benefit or our demise.
Mm.
And how it's actually best utilized is not something that necessarily needs to be taught because it actually unfolds naturally through the process of manifestation. So
Mm.
you were saying before that you learn the difference between manifestation and prayer. ultimately, when people start to manifest, there is this period where it's like getting a new toy. You know, really cool. I can
So
now,
fun.
I can bring things
I
into
am
my,
the universe.
yeah, exactly. And that's a stage that people have to go through. But ultimately, that manifestation tool is only ever being used to impact four areas of life, which are they're the four components of animal life: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending.
Mm.
So the majority of manifestation is being used to impact those four areas of life, which means that just the same way on a material level, they're not actually fulfilling, eternally fulfilling components of life. Just because you have this new tool, this new manifestation tool, doesn't mean that you're going to find fulfillment. Yes, you now have access to a metaphysical principle that you can influence to uh, have an effect in your material life, but to expect some sort of satisfaction from that sort of behavior that's lasting is not actually, it's not recommended. So the idea is that you eventually learn that manifestation should be used as a tool in service of others. That's its
Mm.
proper function.
I love you touched on that. A couple of things I want to add there. One thing about believing that you manifest everything in your reality, you control everything, is the flip side of that. Also feeling responsible for everything in your reality. Like I personally went through a stage where anything would happen to me, be like, how did I manifest this into reality? How did I attract this? How did I create this? And it was a very lonely and helpless period I went through because I was in this rabbit hole of constantly healing and evolving because I thought all the problems I had in life was created by me. And I still do believe I play a part in it, but like we can go down a whole an hour chat about problems versus challenges. But I guess that was another reason why I changed my mind about manifestation versus prayer, just different terms, or believing that I am the universe, I am the creator of everything, to actually I am a part, a quantity. There's
Sure,
something bigger,
sure,
there's something holding me, guiding me.
sure,
And when things that aren't aligned with what I want that's happening, I feel that I always knew certain things like, like, oh, divine redirection. If one door closes, a better one is opening. Well, it wasn't until I fully surrendered to the fact, there is something bigger and it is God and I cannot compare with that, that I guess, eliminated myself from my own suffering as I have to be responsible for everything and it's my problem.
yep.
And now I just feel like I'm not a lonely child in a world that I created anymore. And there's always something, someone guiding
The
me,
pressure's
holding
off.
me. Yeah, the pressure is off. It's amazing. But like you said, I had to go through a natural process. And that's another thing that I was fascinated by yoga philosophy or Matt's class. Everything had a process and it just unfolds naturally. We don't really have to jump through all these hoops of, do I have to do this first? Do I have to do that first? What's the correct way of doing inner child healing, for example? We already know what to do as human beings. Our bodies know how to cure diseases, or we know we should be crying when we feel sad so we don't store trauma, then essentially leads to chronic illnesses, right? And Matt earlier was also talking about our body's ability to heal itself as well. And as souls, we also already have the tools to navigate through life, the silent voices that we've never been taught to listen to. So that is a question I get asked all the time. And I would love to hear from you, right? The silent voice we were talking about, the intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like my connection to the divine.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of silent voices in our heads,
Mm-hmm.
in our being. So, how do you know if a voice is from the divine,
Mm-hmm.
from your intuition,
Mm-hmm.
or based on your own pain from the past,
Mm-hmm.
your own fears or coping mechanism? How do you
Mm-hmm.
differentiate between the two?
Sure. So, this is according to the yogic text. Like as a yoga teacher, my role is not to tell you actually what I think
Hmm.
or what I reckon. The best way I can be of service to you is explain to you what um, the Shastra, the saints and sages and scripture of time immemorial have recorded for us. And from interacting with that knowledge, you will derive the messages that are for you. So if I try and interpret it for you, it's going to lose its potency.
But once again, right, the conversation we were having before, some people are supposed to study, some people are supposed to go spread the knowledge.
Sure.
I think we can direct every person to the book, for example. But let's be real, like we live in a busy society. Not a lot of people have the time or the patience with the attention span to do that. And, you know, that's why I believe people like you yourself are quite important, not quite very important. So you can translate that.
I can tell you what it says.
Yeah, okay.
I can tell you what it says.
Tell me what it says, and I will translate
but
it.
I just wanted to be clear that I'm not saying
Making
what
it
I
up.
reckon.
Yeah.
I'm drawing this from authoritative sources.
Okay.
So you have everyone has divinity within their heart. Essentially, it's localized within their heart, and this aspect is called the Paramatma. It means like the super soul, essentially, and when you can hear that voice clearly, that is when you are perceiving divine instruction, like you mentioned before. But in order to actually perceive that voice clearly, you need to be in a certain state of consciousness, because sometimes we have intuition that's incorrect. We think that it's a particular day of the week, only to find out later that it's actually a Wednesday and not a Tuesday. Or we think that we left our car keys in a particular area and we're so certain that that's where we left them, only to discover that actually we left them somewhere else. So
to me, that's not intuition. That's just you having a brain fog.
Exactly. But your question is, how do we distinguish between them? So how do you distinguish between when you actually really know your car keys are there versus when you're just having a brain fog? And that distinction can only be made in a frequency of consciousness known as sattva. Sattva means goodness. And sattva is a state of consciousness that allows you to use your intelligence decisively. If you are not in a sattvic state of consciousness, then you are going to be more prone to making mistakes. How does one enter a sattvic state of consciousness? By doing sattvic activities, such as rising early to practice sadhana, which is like spiritual routine, spiritual practice, whether that's mantra chanting, whether that's yoga asana, whether that's prayer, whether that's some form of yoga kriya or pranayama, or there's a whole variety of spiritual exercises someone can be doing. But essentially, they're activities that are generally considered bitter in the beginning but sweet in the end. So it's not easy to wake up early. It's not easy to get into an ice bath, but the sweetness is experienced after the actual activity. And the more state of sattva you can cultivate in your consciousness, the clearer it is to distinguish between what is actually clear intuition, clear signal, clear instruction and direction coming from Paramatma, or brain fog. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I was gonna see if I wanted to open a whole cans of worm about to other state. I also learned the other day, but I think that's a very long conversation. But this is what I mean. But I loved learning about yoga philosophy from the source, because the new age spirituality scene, or personal development, psychology, whatever, everything out there gives you so many little practices. It's almost like complicating the process for you to get there, right? A lot of things Matt just mentioned now, like I've been doing, but I've also done 1,000 other things because I thought they would help me elevate my consciousness. Things you've mentioned are so simple. Pranayama, which is what we talk about, breath work, right? Kriya yoga. To me, it's basically tapping, breath work, and a little bit of hypnotherapy included in it. Absolutely love it. Meditation, whether it's passive or active meditation. Like, there are so many tools that's actually accessible to us all the time, like sadhana, right? We can be doing sadhana right now. We are.
Yeah.
It's so easy, it's so accessible, but I do believe there is a tendency, even in the world of spirituality and healing, to turn it into a bit of a money-making machine, right? And this is the importance of what you were saying before. Everything is just so natural. You already know what to do. There's a process. You just got to follow. And that also, to me, ties into like surrender, right? Surrender into the divine. There is a process given to you. You can try and knock your head on 10 other doors to find a better way, or you just trust and do the thing.
Yeah. But there's different spiritual paths, and there's different ways to climb the tree of yoga. Yes, all trees reach towards the sun, but some trees do climb higher than other trees. It's just a fact.
Mm.
So not all philosophical understandings are going to take you to the same point. We live in this world that's uh, interwoven with a concept called postmodernism, and postmodernism is
What are some of your favorite things about postmodernism?
well,
You sound like a huge fan.
I'm I just see the room for error.
Mm,
Although it can be really comforting for some people, ultimately I would prefer to have the truth.
mm,
And the truth is, in any practical area of life, it's objective. The road rules are objective. It doesn't matter whether you don't want to stop at a red light or not. If you don't, you break the law. You put yourself in danger and you risk getting a fine. If you don't believe in gravity, it doesn't matter. If you jump off something very high, your belief in gravity has no impact on whether or not you're going to hit the ground.
mm.
But for some reason, when it comes to spirituality, in this postmodernist world, everyone's entitled to their own truth. It's like a spiritual narcissism in a way, because in
If
everywhere
you know how I talk on my stories.
everywhere else that's practical, it's objective.
Mm,
So if spirituality is practical, then it also has to be objective. Otherwise, what are we measuring ourselves against? What is the actual measuring stick of progress? What is the measuring stick of whether a tool in spirituality is effective or not? So there are details which are totally subjective, and everyone's entitled to their own subjective view of that, such
mm,
as particular names that you want to address stages as, particular names or forms of um, the universe or divine energy. But in terms of the actual process of spiritual evolution, that is as objective as the laws of nature.
mm. It is a
And
law of
it
nature.
is a law of nature, and it the same way everything the blueprint for a tree is contained within the seed, the blueprint for spiritual progress is contained within the seed of surrender.
Mm,
So if you can sow that seed in your heart, that you surrender to a process which is bigger than you will ever be, then you have nothing to worry about. It will actually unfold naturally and sequentially. And this is all recorded in the ancient yogic texts. Every
mm,
single stage of the journey, what it looks like, what the symptoms are, how to tell where you're at, what the next step is, what activities to do in order to purify yourself for the next step. It's not. It's kind of like, you get flat pack furniture. Everyone gives it a red hot crack to put it together, but if all else fails, what do? You read the instructions, right?
mm,
That's what the ancient yogic texts are. They're the instructions for human life.
mm. And it ties into a conversation we are having earlier about prevention versus treating a disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know why, as human beings, we have this beautiful thing called ego.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do it by myself,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. I think it's great motivation. We should
Mm-hmm.
try and error and learn.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think it will be a lot smarter and to save your energy as well to go down, a bit of a rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
of spirituality
Sure.
rather than finding it when shit hits the fan, right? But I believe that's how most people find spirituality. Something horrible happens, or they have some sort of an awakening. They're like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
now I need to know more."
Well,
You
there's
know?
four, according to one of the ancient yogic texts. There's only four possible ways someone can come to the path. One is distress. One is searching for the ultimate truth.
Mm.
One is curiosity, and one is looking for wealth. So you don't come to spirituality unless you fit into one of those four categories.
I think I fit into all four of them.
Yeah, some of us do. Some of us it's more than one,
Mm.
and but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Whatever works, right?
Yeah. In the end of the day, the path is the path. We're talking about Dharma. Doesn't matter why people come into the path. If they do, I'm happy. That's my stance.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if it's because of wealth. Doesn't matter if they wanted to, manifest their dream partner, whatever it is. If that desire or whatever way that got them